This is one beautiful morning. I mean, there's a rainbow right there and a sunset coming. Hey guys, Jared here, and today we're going to be taking a look at probably one of my most requested topics, AlamoFire. Now with AlamoFire, there's lots of aspects to it, but today we're just going to be going over the get method to grab data from the Spotify API. And with our Spotify app that we're creating, today we're just going to be grabbing the titles coming from Spotify, and then in the next video on this, we're going to grab some images as well as learn how to play a 30-second preview. If you want to learn how to do the whole song, you actually need to use the iOS SDK provided by Spotify, and that allows people to log in and such. But today my main focus was how to use AlamoFire, so this is what we're going to be learning. Either way, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, before we get started, I just want to point this out that I am running the GM seed for both Xcode and OS X. So one thing that you need to keep in mind is with this new AlamoFire, in order to get the latest version that actually works with Swift 3, you need to update to the latest Xcode. And also to update to the latest Xcode and get everything working properly with Ruby, you also need to update to the latest OS X. At least that's what I had to do. And also we are going to be using CocoaPods to implement AlamoFire into our project. So you want to make sure that you have the latest version of CocoaPods. So if you don't know how to update, go ahead and look it up and update to the latest version of CocoaPods. Otherwise, this won't work. Either way, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so the first thing we need to do to get started is just go ahead, open up Xcode, and we're going to create a new Xcode project. And this is going to be a single view application. For your product name, go ahead, call this whatever you want. I shall just call mine Spot. And then language, Swift, devices, universal. Go ahead, click next, and we should be good to go and create. So now we have this project built. Now let's go ahead and install AlamoFire inside of this project. Now the way we do this is by using CocoaPods. So if you don't know what that is, you can just go ahead, open up Safari, and head over to cocoapods.org. And what you're going to do is just go ahead and install CocoaPods. So you can either say sudo gem install CocoaPods or just say gem install CocoaPods. This $sign is not needed. But you want to take this code right here and implement that into terminal in order to get this all up and running. So you would just take this code right here, sudo gem install CocoaPods, copy that, paste that, and then you hit enter, and then you just enter your password and it would install CocoaPods. I already have mine installed, so we can continue on, and let's go ahead and install CocoaPods into our project that we just built. So I'm gonna go ahead and see where I am by saying ls. So this is seeing where I am in my project right now, in my directory. And then I can say cd to go to a directory that I want to go to. So this is going to be cd desktop. ls, and then I want to go to cd spot, ls, and this is where I want to be. And if you have CocoaPods all up and running, you should be able to just say pod init. And that's going to actually put a pod file in there inside of your project so that you can add AlamoFire to that. So with that over with, if you didn't get any errors, everything should be installed. So we can go ahead, head over here to your folder, and this is where you have pod file and spot. So you can now go ahead, take this pod file, and let's go ahead and add AlamoFire into this. So first off, because we are going to be using iOS 10 in this instance, I'm going to go up here where it says uncomment this line to define a global platform for your project. You can just go ahead, uncomment that, and you're just going to add 10.0, which is the current iOS version that we are going to be working with, and the one that works with Swift 3. And it's important to do this because otherwise you would get the wrong AlamoFire coming in. You would actually be getting version 3.4 coming in, whereas we want version 4.0, which is the Swift 3 version. So just keep that in mind. Now let's go ahead, continue on, and let's go ahead and add some pods into our Spot project by going over here to Safari, and you can just go ahead and just type in AlamoFire, and it's going to be this one that says github.com/AlamoFire. You're just going to go ahead, click on that, and then inside of this is going to tell you how to install it via CocoaPods. So right here you can see down here, to integrate AlamoFire into your Xcode project using CocoaPods, specify it in your pod file. So we already had that pod file created. That's exactly what this is. And we just need to go ahead and add this one simple line of code in there. So we're just going to go ahead, copy that, head back over to our project, and paste that right in there. And that should make everything work perfectly. Now let's go ahead, hit Command S to save that. Then let's pop back into terminal, and now you're just going to go ahead and say pod install. And that's going to install AlamoFire into your Xcode project so that you can use it. And as you can see, the pod installation was complete. So one thing you need to do is just go ahead and close up your Xcode project. And now as you can see inside of your folder right here, you actually have spot.xc workspace. So you want to make sure that when you work with this project now, you are working with the Xcode workspace from now on. Now, one thing that it's going to say right here is convert to current Swift syntax when you open this up. The target AlamoFire contains source code developed with an earlier version of Swift. This is actually incorrect. And the way you fix this, we'll do this in just a second. But one thing you want to make sure is you can see that this is installing Alamo 4.0. or greater. So if you have anything 4.0 or greater, that is Swift 3. But if you actually get 3.4, you want to make sure that you're updated on CocoaPods, Xcode, and also macOS to make sure that everything's working properly. But if you have 4.0, you're good to go. Now let's go ahead and continue on, and here you have convert to current Swift syntax. Go ahead and say later, and then later. So here's our project with AlamoFire installed inside of our pods. As you can see, we have our AlamoFire.framework, and also down here we have AlamoFire. So this is where all your files are stored. But one thing that it's telling me right now is that I'm using the legacy version of Swift, but that is incorrect. This is an error that just keeps on happening to me, so I'm assuming it happens to some other people. So this is how you fix it. So you're just going to go ahead, click on this pods right here, the Xcode project for pods. You're going to click on the AlamoFire build target right here and head over here to your build settings. And then inside of here, we're just going to go ahead and search for legacy. And this is going to be the one that says use legacy Swift language version, and it's going to say either unspecified or yes or no. What we're wanting is it is actually using the current version, so it's not a legacy version, it's not an older version. So we're just going to go ahead and set that to no. And now if you were to build and run this now, it's going to recognize that all the files inside of AlamoFire are actually Swift 3 compatible, and it's going to run smoothly. We don't have anything going on right now, so I'm going to cancel that process. Now let's go ahead and work with AlamoFire inside of our project, now that we have all that set up. So we're going to go ahead, head over here to our main.storyboard, and just delete that view controller that's on there, and we're just going to add a table view controller on there, like so. Now with this table view, I'm also going to head over here to my attributes inspector and say is initial view controller. That way we don't get a black screen when we build and run our application. That way this is the first view that loads. So now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and connect this up to our viewcontroller.swift file. So inside of here you have class viewController is equal to a viewController and a UI viewController. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this equal to a UI table view controller, like so, and then I'm going to give this the class name of my table view controller. And we're good to go with that, so let's head back over here to our main.storyboard, click on our view controller again, and we're going to head over here to our identity inspector, and we're going to set our class equal to that of our table view controller that we just set up right over here. So now anything that we add is going to affect the main.storyboard. Now let's go ahead, continue on with our viewcontroller.swift and set up our table view. And now we have our table view all set up. Now before we actually get into setting up each of the cells inside of our table view, let's go ahead and load some data. So the way we do this is we're going to go down here and I'm going to create a new function. And what this is going to be called is call Alamo. And essentially this is going to be a function that grabs the data from the URL that I provide. So I'm going to go ahead and say func call Alamo, open parentheses, and inside of here I want to have a URL. So I'm just going to go ahead and set this equal to URL:string. So what this is meaning is when we call this function now, if I were to head up here to my view did load or something, you can say call Alamo, and then you could just put in your string like so. I'm trying to make this feature as expendable as possible. That way you can call Alamo from anywhere inside of the scene. When you click a button or when the view loads, anything like that. So that's what this is for. So what URL is this going to be? Well, I'm going to be working with Spotify, so we can just go over here to developer.spotify.com. And it should just take you over to this screen right here. Now you can go over here to your tools, and then we're just going to click on the Web API. And this is going to allow us to access certain points in Spotify. So we have Web API, and then we just want to go to the API console. Then inside of our API console right here, we have a certain list of functions. So you can get an artist, or you can get several artists, you can get a track or several tracks, you can search for an item, and that is precisely what we are going to do. So I'm going to add some search functionality into my project. Now in order to get this search functionality working, you need these two things down here. You need a query, this is meaning who or what you're searching for, and then we need an item type. This is kind of an album, an artist, a track, or a playlist. What are you searching for? So in this example that they have right here, you can put in track, or you can add some more things. So you can say comma, artist, comma, album, And you can add all of those things, but I think I'm actually just going to be searching for tracks in this instance, just to make things not confusing. Then we can go ahead and take this query right here, and again, this is who are you searching for. So I could just put in Shawn Mendes or something like that, and that'll search for that artist with their tracks. And then down here you also have these other functions. What market are we in? Limit. How many tracks do you want to pull from this search? I'm just going to keep it at the default, which I believe is 20. So we can just go ahead and leave that as is. And then with our offset here, this is important to note if you want to keep loading tracks. So you would just say offset equals 20. So this actually adds this ampersand offset equals 20 right there. And if you were doing this inside of your project, you would make sure that if you reload at the bottom of the screen, you want to make sure you have that offset so it calls the right tracks. Either way, that's pretty much how the Spotify API works. Just important to note all of this stuff. Thank you, Slider M. So now we can just go ahead and continue on, and as you can see I have my HTTPS. I'm just going to take this, copy that, and I'm just going to go back here to my URLs. I'm going to create a search URL, so I'm going to say var search URL will be equal to open close quote, and you're just going to put that right in there. Make sure that you don't have the curl x get or anything. You just want to make sure that you have the main URL from there, and that should make everything work. And now that we have that URL, let's go ahead and start using AlamoFire. So we need to go up here and we're going to say import AlamoFire. Make sure that is compiling properly. You can build and run this just to make sure that everything compiles properly. Okay, looks like we're all good to go now. Now we can go ahead and continue on with this function down here, and we're going to say AlamoFire dot, and then you're just going to say request, and you're requesting a URL. So you can have URL or URL request convertible. I think either of those work, but you can pick whatever you want. So with our URL that we're requesting, this is of course going to be our search URL. But just to keep this expendable, you want to make sure that you're using this URL right here. So that is right there. So we have AlamoFire.request URL. So now if we call the function, we can actually just say call Alamo, and then we could just go ahead and put in our search URL. And the search URL is not always going to be a static thing. Right now it is, but in video number 2, it's not going to be. So this is why we always want to make sure that everything's as dynamic as possible. Then we can go ahead and continue on, and we're just going to say .response JSON, because we want the JSON data that's coming from this API that we're accessing. So we're just going to say response JSON. For this completion handler right here, you can see that it's requiring a data response any. So you need to just go ahead, say open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and we need to create our data response. So I'm going to create a new variable called my response in. And then this response is going to hold all the data coming from our response JSON. So this response right here is actually a data response. So if you want to see everything that's inside of a data response, you can just type in data response dot, and then you see in it is a request, a response, the data, and the result. We're just going to be working with the data that's coming from it. Thank you, Felix. So now that we have this response right here, we want to take that data and parse it into something that's readable for us. So we can just go ahead and say func parse data, open parentheses, and this is of course what kind of data are we accessing. And for this, we're not using NS data, we're actually just using data. So I'm going to go ahead and say my JSON data colon, and then I'm going to set this equal to data. This is a change from Swift 3, this data instead of NS data, just so you know that. Now we can go ahead and say open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and now let's go ahead and parse that data. But first, let's just go ahead and see what our data looks like. So I'm going to say parse data, and then we have the JSON data that's coming in, and this is of course going to be equal to our response.data. And then you need to add an exclamation point in order to get that working properly, to unwrap it. And then also it looks like it wants me to add self.parseData, and we are good to go. So now we have it when the view loads that we're calling AlamoFire with the search URL. We're going to call Alamo, and then we're going to parse that data with this function right here. So let's go ahead and parse that data. So in order to do this, we need to go ahead and say do open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and inside of here we're going to serialize that JSON data that's coming in, meaning that we're actually going to see and read that data that's coming in. So I'm going to say var my readable JSON will be equal to, I'm going to set this equal to a try value of JSON serialization dot JSON object, and this is this one right here. So we want to make sure that we have the JSON object with data, options, and throws. So you want to make sure you have the one that says throws. That's why we're doing this do, try, catch. That way we can see what errors happen or occur inside of it. So before we actually put our value inside of our readable JSON right here, we just need to go ahead and say catch open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and then we're going to print whatever error comes through if there is an error. So we can just go ahead and say print error, like so. And now we're good to go. Now let's go ahead and input that data that's coming through. So we have with data, and of course that's our JSON data that's being passed through right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in JSON data, like so. And then with our options right here, you can just say dot, and then we want this one that says mutable containers. Now this is important because we want to be able to read that JSON and also manipulate with that JSON. That's why we have mutable, meaning that it can be molded a little bit. So in order to mold this, another thing we need to do is say this is as an open bracket, close bracket, and then this is going to be a string, colon, and this is going to be any object that's being passed through. This is just how JSON data works, and if you want to parse it up properly, this is how it works. Now, one thing that you can do, and this is actually very helpful in the future because we're going to be using this as string any object a ton, you can go ahead and put in a type alias. So we're going to say type alias. With the type name, I'm just going to go ahead and call this my JSON standard or something like that. I'm just pulling stuff out of my mind, but we have the type alias JSON standard, and then I'm going to set this equal to the type expression of what we have right there. So I'm going to copy that and just paste that right there. And now we can go ahead down here, and what this is able to do is we just basically took that variable and we applied it there. So we could just say JSON standard. Again, we're going to be using that a ton, so this just helps that process. Now, in order to grab these tracks that are coming in, we need to first understand our JSON that's coming in. So let's go ahead and say print our readable JSON. And let's see what we get from the API of Spotify. That rhymed. And now our application is built and run, but the main thing that you'll see is down here inside of our console, in which you can actually see this is the data that's coming in. So let's just go ahead and get an understanding of what's going on right now. So we have optional tracks, colon, and then we have open curly bracket. So inside of these tracks right here, this is what's stored in all these tracks that are coming through. Just a ton of items. So you want to keep in mind that these are all items that are coming in, because there are, if you were to go down here to the bottom right here, you have a limit of 20, as you can see, and an offset of 0. So these items, there are 20 items in total, and you want to be circulating through all of these items to get the data that you need. So let's go ahead and do that. So the way we access each of the items that are inside of here, we want to first go down the line. So we have our tracks, so we want to first access the tracks. Then inside of that, we want to go into our item, and we want to access each and every one of those items that are going in there as well. So the way we do this is we have our readable JSON right here, and we're just going to go ahead and say if let our tracks equal, I'm going to set this equal to my readable JSON, then open bracket, close bracket, and then inside of here, we're going to be grabbing our tracks, as you can see. And now with this, we want to make sure that we're setting this equal to a JSON standard. With this, we want to just go ahead and set this equal to an as exclamation point our JSON standard. Then say open curly bracket, close curly bracket. Now one little thing that I'm noticing is that you're getting this little error that wants to add a question mark right in there. If you want to fix that, just go right up here to our readable JSON and just put this as an exclamation point and not as a question mark. And then with this one down here, unlike this one right up here where it has an exclamation point, we actually want this one to have a question mark. Got those mixed up. So now we should be good to go with our tracks. So now let's just go ahead and access the items inside of those tracks. So we're going to say if let items equal, I'm going to set this equal to our tracks, open bracket, close bracket, and then this is of course going to be my items. And then with this, we don't need to do anything further, so I'm just going to say open curly bracket, close curly bracket, like so. And then with this, we want to first get the number of items, so I'm going to just go ahead and say let num of items equal, and I'm just going to go ahead and set that equal to our items.count. We're counting how many items are inside of that array that's coming from there. So we didn't need this as JSON standard on this one, because with this is pretty much our final level. So we just need to go ahead and say for I in 0 ... less than, and this is going to be my items.count. So we're counting the amount of items that are coming through. Then we say open curly bracket, close curly bracket, like so. And now we can grab a specific item. So we can say let my item equal, and I'm going to set this equal to my items, open bracket, close bracket, and this is for the value of I. Again, we're cycling through all the items and we're grabbing the variables accordingly. Then we want to go ahead and grab the name of our track. So right down here, you can see that you have all of these different things that you can access. You can get the name, you can get the popularity, the preview URL, the track number, all that jazz. I'm just going to go ahead and grab the name. So we can go ahead, close that off. And then now I'm going to say let my name equal item, open bracket, close bracket, and this is just going to be my name. And one thing I forgot to mention is with this item right here, we want to go ahead and set this as our JSON standard. And now we should be able to access that name properly. Now with these names, let's go ahead and add them into our table view, finally. So the way we do this is we're just going to go ahead and say let my names equal, and I'm going to set this equal to an array of string, open close parentheses. And then now down here, I can just go ahead and say names dot append, and I'm going to append my name that is coming through. This name right here. And I always keep doing this. So with our names right here, this should actually be var names, not let names, because var is able to be changed and let is not. So we have names.append, and this is going to be our name. But this doesn't really know that it's going to be as a string. So we right after this name right here, you're just going to say as a string. Now let's go ahead and add these names onto our table view. So first off, we want to figure out how many rows. So I'm going to say table view number of rows in section, and we're going to return the value because it's expecting an integer right here. We're going to return the value of our names.count. And then with each of these cells that are coming through, we have table view cell for row at index path, this one right here. And with this, we want to have a return value of a cell. So we first want to create that cell. So I'm going to say let my cell equal our table view dot DQ reusable cell with identifier, this one right here. And then we're just going to add the identifier of our capital CELL. We don't have this set up inside of our main.storyboard just yet, but we will in just a minute. And then after this, we can just go ahead and say return the value of our cell, and then it wants it unwrapped, so just go ahead and put exclamation point. And you're good to go. Now let's go ahead and add a label onto our cell just by easily saying cell.textLabel.text will be equal to that of our names for the index path dot row. And there you have it. Now let's go ahead and hook up our cell properly to our table, our main.storyboard. So we can go ahead, click on this, click on our cell, and we have over here inside of our attributes inspector, we have an identifier with a reuse identifier. And of course, this is going to be capital CELL. Like so. And now we should have everything loading up onto that cell properly. Now, one last thing we need to do is actually reload our table view when we get all these names. So I'm going to say self.tableview.reload data. Like so. Now let's go ahead and build around this, and we should have all the data loading in properly. And there you have it. So now we have everything loading up onto our scene inside of this table view. Right now we don't have anything actually happening. That is, of course, in video 2, so stay tuned for that. Either way, though, we went through the process of adding AlamoFire into our project. We parsed that JSON data coming from Spotify. Woo, we did it. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you want to see part 2 of this, be sure to subscribe. If you have any suggestions going forward in this project, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see what I can do. Either way, have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Can I just lay on my bed and do a video? Hey guys, Jared here, and today we're going to be doing something awesome.